So, my last couple videos on mortgages and rent versus buy brought in a flood of comments. And I'm not gonna lie, I loved it. But you also called me out. You said, the math isn't fair. You said, you didn't count taxes. You said, my payment isn't just principal and interest. You ignored escrow. And a bunch of you said the real one, bro, who keeps the same house for 30 years. Fair. So, today I'm doing the cleaner version of this question. If you've got an extra $1,000 a month, should you invest it or should you pay down your mortgage? And this time we're redoing it with a scenario that actually feels like real life in the US. We're going to compare the strategies in a way that's actually fair. We're going to talk about taxes without pretending everyone's situation is identical. We're going to talk about the thing that makes people lose sleep: risk. And then I'll give you one framework that makes the decision obvious for your specific situation. Let's do it. All right, here's the setup. You buy a home for $450,000, you put 20% down, so you finance $360,000. You get a 30-year fixed mortgage at 6.16%, which is right in the neighborhood of what a lot of people are seeing recently. That puts your principal and interest payment around $2,196 per month. Now, and this is where people always get tripped up, that it's not your full housing cost, because in America most people pay escrow every month, property taxes and insurance. So let's use simple, reasonable nationwide averages. Property taxes. Call it around 0.86% of home value per year. On a $450,000 house, that's roughly $3,870 a year, or about $323 a month. Road. Homeowners insurance, call it roughly $2,424 per year, which is about $202 per month. So your all-in monthly housing payment looks like this: $2,196, principal and interest, plus $323 property tax, plus $202 insurance. That's about $2,721 per month. And I'm saying these numbers out loud because I want you to notice something. When people argue online about paying off your mortgage, they often talk like your payment disappears. It doesn't. When your mortgage is gone, you still owe property taxes, you still owe insurance, you still owe maintenance. So we're going to treat those honestly today. Now fast forward 1 year, you've been paying for 12 months, you get a raise or a bonus, or you start a small side hustle. And now you have an extra $1,000 per month that you can either invest or throw at your mortgage. Here's the question. Do you use that $1,000 to get rid of debt faster, or do you invest it and let compound growth do its thing? And before we run numbers, I need to set rules, because this is where the math police are totally right. If you're going to compare strategies, it has to be fair. So here are the 5 rules. Rule number 1. Same extra cash flow, $1,000 a month in all cases. Rule number 2. If your income rises over time, your extra contribution rises too. So we're going to assume a 3% step up per year, meaning that extra $1,000 becomes $1,030 next year, and so on. Rule number 3. We separate principal and interest from escrow. Paying off a mortgage removes P&I, but not property taxes and insurance. Rule number 4. Taxes matter, so we'll talk about 2 buckets. If you invest in a retirement account, that's very different than investing in a taxable account. Rule number 5. We'll look at long-term results. But we'll also talk about what happens if you sell in 7 or 10 years, because most people do. Cool. Now, scenario A is what most people say online. Just invest it. The market returns more than your mortgage rate. So you invest $1,000 per month starting after year 1, and you increase it by 3% per year. What return should we assume? This is where people get religious. So instead of pretending we know the future, I'm going to give you 3 return environments. A conservative long-run case, 7% per year. More optimistic case, 9% per year, and a rough bad stretch case, 5% per year, not because 5% is guaranteed, but because the market can absolutely give you a decade where things feel terrible. So what happens if you invest only? Over the remaining 29 years of the mortgage, that $1,000 monthly investment, stepping up by 3% a year, at 7%, it grows to roughly $1.47 million. At 9%, it grows to roughly $2.04 million. At 5%, it grows to roughly $1.08 million. And when you hear that, your brain goes, okay, investing wins. Easy. But we're not done.
Oh, because the reason people even ask this question is not because they're dumb.
It's because mortgages don't behave the way people think they do. If you've never looked at an amortization schedule, it feels like a scam. Month 1, you pay $2,196 in principal and interest, and most of it is interest. That's not a conspiracy, it's math. Your balance is huge at the beginning, so interest is huge at the beginning. And that's why so many people emotionally crave paying extra. Because extra payments hit principal directly. So, scenario B is, you take that extra $1,000 per month, you step it up 3% every year. And instead of investing it, you dump it into your mortgage as extra principal payments. What happens? In this exact scenario, $360,000 at 6.16%. With that extra principal starting after year 1, you don't take 30 years. You pay the mortgage off in roughly 13 years and 9 months. Let that sink in. That's not a tiny change. That's a massive change. And your total interest paid drops dramatically. With the normal schedule, you'd pay roughly $430,000 in interest over 30 years. With aggressive prepayment, you pay roughly $185,000 in interest. That's a savings of around $245,000 in interest. And here's the part that feels amazing, that savings is basically guaranteed. When you pay down a 6.16% mortgage, the return is not maybe, it's not average, it's not over long periods, it's locked in. It's like earning 6.16% on your money with no volatility. So if you're the kind of person who's like, I don't care what the spreadsheet says, I hate debt, that guaranteed return feels incredible. But again, we are still not done. Because the invest-only people will say, sure, you saved interest, but you also gave up investing those dollars, and they're right. So we have to do the real comparison. And the real comparison is not, how much interest did I save? The real comparison is, what is your total wealth after 30 years under different market outcomes if you follow each strategy? So let's do scenario B correctly. If you prepay aggressively, you finish the mortgage in about 13 years and 9 months. At that moment, what changes? You no longer owe principal and interest, but you still owe taxes and insurance. So you don't magically free up the full $2,721 per month. You free up the P&I part, about $2,196, plus whatever extra principal you were paying by then. And remember, because of the 3% step-up, that extra payment is not still $1,000 after 14 years. It has grown. By the time you reach payoff, your extra payment has stepped up to roughly $1,425 per month. So the total cash flow you free up at payoff is $2,196 P&I plus about $1,425 extra. That's about $3,621 per month now available to invest. And because we're being fair, we're still going to step that up by 3% per year going forward. So now the prepay strategy becomes Phase 1. Prepay until the mortgage is gone. Phase 2. Invest the freed up cash flow for the remaining years. Now the big question, does that beat investing from the start? Hear us what the math looks like, and I'm going to give you results in the same 3 return environments. If the market delivers 7% long-term, then invest only ends around $1.47 million. Prepay thin invest ends around $1.40 million. So in that scenario, investing wins, but not by a landslide. It's about $70,000 difference. If the market delivers 9%, investing wins by more. Invest only ends around $2.04 million. Prepath and invest ends around $1.67 million. That's a bigger gap, roughly $370,000. But here's where it gets spicy. If the market delivers 5%, the mid-decade world invest only ends around $1.08 million. Prepath invests ends around $1.18 million. In that environment, prepay wins. And this is the point most people miss. The best strategy depends on the return environment you live through. And you don't get to choose the return environment. Which brings us to the thing that makes this entire debate emotionally real. Sequence of returns risk. Let's say you invest every month like a champ, but the first 5 or 8 years of your investing life are rough. You didn't do anything wrong. You just started at a bad time. That can happen. And in real life, This is where people lose faith. They say, investing doesn't work. It does work, but the order matters. Meanwhile, mortgage prepayment has zero sequence risk. Your return is the mortgage rate. Every month, guaranteed. And that certainty has value. Now, before we jump to the framework, I want to address two of the biggest comment section wars: taxes and liquidity. Let's talk taxes. People love to say mortgage payoff is tax-free. That's sloppy. Where's the clean version? When you invest in a taxable account, you may eventually pay capital gains taxes on growth. When you invest in tax-advantaged accounts like a 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, HSA, the tax treatment can be dramatically better. So the after-tax return depends heavily on where you invest. On the other side, mortgage interest can sometimes be deductible, but not everyone itemizes. A lot of people take the standard deduction. So your mortgage rate is not always your after-tax rate. The honest truth is, taxes vary wildly by household. So here's how I want you to think about it without getting lost. If you're investing in a taxable account, mentally haircut your expected market return a bit, because taxes and behavior reduce what people actually keep. If you're investing through retirement accounts and you're getting employer match, it's at a whole different game. Which brings me to my rule that I am going to say very clearly. Before you argue invest versus prepay, most people should do three things first. 1. Build an emergency fund. 6 to 12 months of expenses in cash. 2. Get your employer match in your 401k. If your employer matches, that is literally free money. 3. Kill high-interest debt. If you have any debt over 10%, credit cards, personal loans, certain car loans, you pay that off before you do anything else, because you are not going to reliably beat a 15% credit card rate in the stock market. Okay, now liquidity. This is the other half of the internet war. The prepay crowd says, debt-free is freedom. The invest crowd says, liquidity is freedom. And both are right. Because here's the real-world issue. Home equity is not a checking account. You cannot buy groceries with home equity. You cannot pay a mortgage with unrealized stock gains if you lose your job and panic sell at the bottom, so liquidity matters. And this is where time horizon comes in. Let's talk about what happens if you don't stay in the house for 30 years. Let's say you sell after 10 years. If you invest only for 10 years, you've built an investment portfolio of roughly $165,000 in the 7% world. Your mortgage balance is still around $303,000. If you prepay only for 10 years, you may have built almost no investment portfolio because you put everything into the loan. But your mortgage balance might be closer to $142,000. That means you've built roughly $160,000 of extra home equity. So the wealth difference may not be huge at year 10. The difference is where your wealth lives. Invest only gives you a portfolio you can access. Prepay gives you equity locked inside the house. If you plan to move in 7 to 10 years, liquidity becomes more important. If you plan to stay long-term and you value security, prepay becomes more attractive. And now we're ready for the actual answer, because the actual answer is not always invest, and it's not always pay off your mortgage. The real answer is a framework that makes the decision obvious for you. Here's the framework. I call it the Freedom Fund Rule, the F-squared rule, because it balances two types of freedom: freedom from risk and freedom from scarcity. Step 1. The foundation test. Ask 3 yes or no questions. Do I have an emergency fund? Am I getting my retirement match? Do I have any debt over 10%? If any of those answers are no, you fix that first. Step 2. The rate test. Where does your mortgage rate fall? If your mortgage rate is above 8%, prepay becomes extremely compelling because that guaranteed return is hard to beat. If your mortgage rate is below 4%, vesting becomes extremely compelling because your mortgage is basically cheap money compared to long-term market returns. If your rate is between 4% and 8%, which is where a lot of people are right now, the math is close enough that psychology and risk tolerance decide the winner. Which brings us to step 3. Step 3. The flex test. What's your real life? Are you close to retirement? Is your job stable? Do you work in an industry that can get cut overnight? Do you sleep fine with debt? Or does it haunt you? Because here's the truth. A strategy you can't stick to is the worst strategy. If investing makes you anxious, and you'll stop the moment the market drops, you're not getting the average return. You're getting the emotional return. And if paying off the mortgage makes you feel trapped because you have no liquidity, you're not getting freedom either. So here's how you turn that framework into an actual action plan. If you're young, job stable, and you have a long runway, you might do something like 70% investing, 30% prepay. If you're in the middle rate, in the 4 to 8 zone, you value both, you might do 50/50ths. If you're closer to retirement, job uncertain, or debt stresses you out, you might do 30% investing, 70% prepay. And the point is not that these splits are magic. The point is that they force you to do both things that matter: build wealth and reduce risk. Because the real enemy is not the mortgage. The real enemy is living your life on a knife's edge. No liquidity, no plan, no margin. That's the trap. So here's my challenge to you. Before you open your mortgage app or your brokerage app, do this. Write down what financial freedom means to you. Does it mean sleeping at night with no debt? Or does it mean having liquid assets and options? Does it mean retiring earlier? Or does it mean stability even if your job disappears? Once you know what freedom means to you, this decision becomes obvious. If you want, I'm going to make this even easier. I'm putting a calculator spreadsheet together that lets you plug in your loan balance, rate extra payment, tax situation, and your time horizon to 7 years, 10 years, 30 years, and it will show you the trade-offs without the internet screaming at you. Drop your mortgage rate and your state in the comments, and I'll pick a few real viewer scenarios and run them on camera in the next video. Because there isn't one right answer. There's your answer. And as long as you're re-choosing intentionally with clear assumptions and a plan you can stick to, you're going to be fine. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got my own extra $1,000 this month. And yes, I still wrestle with it too.